Right, folks, welcome back. I hope you're all refreshed, well-fed, re-energized for our final surge now towards the practical conclusions for the day. And what we really want to do in this final session is to focus on how we achieve the aspirations that we've set out. What are the takeaways that we've all collectively worked on over these two brilliant days? And in particular, we're going to look at three themes. A different kind of learning. How do we take the ideas to scale? And what are the gateways, pathways, and matrix that will then measure the success of what we're doing? And the plan is that we're going to, like education ping pong, go back and forth between our very distinguished panel and then several of you as well. We want this, as with the other sessions, to be as interactive and practical as possible. And then we'll lead up to then hearing from some of the institutions on their reactions, from Mr. Wang as one of the supporters of the conference, and of course from one of our heroes of global education, Andreas Schleicher, on his reflections on what we've said. But we're going to start with Vishal, if we may. What are your takeaways on what have you heard about how learning is changing and whether there is a potential now for a different kind of learning?
Sorry. I think my key takeaway from since yesterday in the conversations has been that we know what's not working, and we also know what's working. And there seems to be a broad consensus about what's working. There are many elements to it, there are many layers to it. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg. However, a big sense I'm picking up in the conversations, that I don't know if it's something that's unique to people who turn up at the OECD, is the fear to embrace the new. I believe we are in a moment in history where the choices we make today could truly define how the world is shaped for the next 50 to 100 years. Such an exciting time. And that's why the fear is valid. I mean, imagine 150 years back when a bunch of people were talking like this and said, children need to go into a building with 4 walls and sit and learn a set of subjects. I can tell you a lot of people would have laughed at that idea then. But today, the minute a child is born, I have my own friends back in India, the minute they know they're going to have a child, they start thinking about which school the child will go to. They are standing in long, long queues to get application forms for admission of their child in some of the best schools. They'd never sit back and think, should my child go to school at all? They never think back and think, just worry about what kind of learning should my child get. It's become a norm. It's become the new norm of the world. And we have managed to get nearly all our children into school today across the world. The question we're sitting on now is that system that worked for maybe 100 odd years is no longer working. And as it is with any system, change is imperative. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. So my invitation is that let's acknowledge the fear, and let's also look at that we could potentially be creating history and shape the future of this world for the next 50 to 100 years. So that's my big takeaway.
Thank you very much. It's powerful stuff. Basically, we're going to acknowledge the fear, but also try and channel the excitement that we've experienced over the last couple of days, that we are actually at the cusp of something extraordinary, and that we have come a long way as well. I want to get a reaction from where Jesse and Anna are going to give us a reaction to Vishal's thought there. Have we got Jesse and Anna? Would anyone else like to give a reaction then? In the absence of Jesse and Anna, this is a chance for someone. Are we going to reawaken? How are we going to reawaken learning? I'm going to go exactly. You're exactly right. I'm just going to go with the microphone towards the younger end of the room. I think I see Matha. Thank you, Matha.
I completely understand the fear, and your description is actually pretty accurate. Being a person who's still going to school myself, I fear that I'm wasting my time because I don't see the connection between what I'm doing in school and all these theories and pedagogies that I'm learning about and how they translate to real life work. And I've had that limited experience in work placement and have seen that struggle. But I think I see hope when we have conversations like this, and I hope that the conversation doesn't end here and actually manifests into opportunities and real work that actually takes these conversations and implements them. And I think we see that in the previous panel where they were sharing all the different case studies of different schools, different countries, and how they're revolutionizing education. And I share similar sentiments of like, we need to change the education system that we have right now. It needs to be more engaging for our youth. And I think what saddens me the most is seeing my 10-year-old brother hate school at the age of 10. I'm like, we all hated school by the age of like 16, 17 in our angsty teenage phase, but being 10 years old and hating school, that's a bit too early.
Thank you, Matha. And I have to say, one of the most amazing things about these 2 days has been the extent to which we've heard the younger voices in the room. I don't think I've been at an education meeting that has been like that. Yes, I'm coming your way. That has been as interactive in that way. And one of the things young people were saying was, we need to be treated with more dignity and respect. And I hope that you have felt that that has been the case. Shout if it isn't, younger people. You can grab the microphone and take it away from me if you think it's not been the case. Where am I going? Anna, Jesse.
Yeah, it's actually, I was an architecture student when I was in college, so this is actually the first time I attend education-related forum. Fun is just very amazing is that we've covered different kind of topics and we go outside of the classroom to discuss education. We've heard about opinions on vocational education, we've heard debates on it. We've also heard about education for adults and continuing education. These topics are I didn't get involved with before, and we've heard different kinds of different opinions from different groups, across cultures, across nations. We combine business leaders with educational leaders. It's just a very amazing opportunity for me and other I think young students from different parts of the world who are not professional educators, but interested in these kind of topics. So yeah, love the FWE. Thank you.
And Jesse, in your view, what should the future of education look like? What is the education you're looking for?
From my perspective, I'll use probably 3 words to describe future education. The first one might be practical, because I heard the Switzerland case about their vocational training for students to help them adapt career and society. I think education needs to be practical to solve the problem of people need to feed themselves, feed their family. That's the first word. The second is empowering. They need to teach them skills and give them the ability to have a lifelong learning. That's the second word. The third word might be accessible. It should be accessible for everyone, not only the elites, but also adults, but also younger kids who need a better fundamental education. Empowering, practical, and accessible.
Thank you. And so you have there, and we've heard, a really bold vision for the future of education. Olli-Pekka, what's your takeaway about how we actually move that vision, how we scale that up, how we take it to scale?
Yes, thank you. I think we've heard kind of different perspectives to the same question this morning. And what I was hearing was, first of all, I think there was quite a strong emphasis on seeing that we must be very coherent with what we are doing. That it doesn't help if we kind of create every year a new strategy that's kind of only ruining the trust in the system, but we need to kind of be coherent. And then there's the question that coherent with what? And there I've heard, I think Hekia was telling about using the word that let's create a movement, and telling about the movement that during her ministerial years that was created. And that's the kind of question that it's creating a shared vision. And it was not only your movement, but you were telling about how it is an issue that is kind of shared, and there's the commitment of involving all the shareholders to that process. Because that is something that is essential when we're talking also about implementation, that if we involve in creating the movement and the passion, then it's much, much more easier to implement it, because everybody already knows what we're talking about. And the kind of third thing I heard was that there was very strongly the idea of values that we're taking up. And I think that's an important point, because culture has the kind of property that it kind of tries to stay unchanged. And the rational approach holds the same character. So when you kind of make rational decisions, you actually try to minimize risk. So you change as little as possible. And then we come to the question that at the end, it's really about emotions that make the change. And in that sense, there must be the kind of value base that is behind there, making the change in the system. And then I would like to kind of, we just heard the idea that the education should be practical. And I think that there's the kind of question that how we can create a system that which actually is a constant reflection between theory and practice. Theory and practice, and the learning and reflection there. And that's not only the thing for students and pupils teaching and learning, but it's the same thing for the whole system. That's how the system learns, that there is the theory of change, but then there is also the experiential learning for teachers, school communities, all the different actors in the system, which makes it also a scalable thing, that you can kind of, as an end product, you can scale a product really. But when we're talking about education, teaching and learning, it's about humans. And you cannot kind of scale something somewhere and then took it to the other place and say that this was the outcome, now take this into use. Because those people have not gone through the same learning process. So the thing that you can scale is the kind of showing that this kind of process seems to be working, and why don't you start that learning path yourself? So I think the kind of last point that was taken up very strongly was that teachers are central in making the change happen. And then again, it's not only kind of individual teachers. I think we heard from the math teachers community side from UK today very strongly the idea that how to build the networks. where teachers learn together, where they co-create the new challenges. And that's the thing that we are we need to create processes where we involve and align all the different actors in the system in order that it is the change is made possible.
Thank you very much. And it was indeed very striking, that sense that we do need a mathematical approach to it that came through so strongly from Charlie, from his experience on maths. Come in for a comment, and then I'd like to bring in Valerie.
Thank you. My name is Yilan Li. I'm from Mr. Wang Gongfa's team and sponsor of FWE. My question goes for the Finnish Minister Hanoyan. In 2012, Mr. Pasi Sabager published a best-selling book called Finnish Lessons. What can the world learn from educational change in Finland? So when I studied education policy at Columbia University, my professor, Harry Levin, wrote a review for the book, said, this book is a wake-up call for the United States. Finland went from the mediocre academic results to one of the top performers in the world, and Finland did it through the union's minimal testing, national collaboration, and elevating the teaching to a high-status calling. So what are the new lessons that the world can learn from the recent educational change in Finland? And what are the major challenges that Finland are facing during the educational reform process? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Excellent questions. I would like to take up two issues. The first one being that we have noticed that, as I was telling this morning, our system is a network of autonomous actors. In order to make change happen in that system so that in the future also the closest school is a good school, we need more support structures in the system. We need different processes that help the teachers and schools to innovate, all of them. And the networks where schools, municipalities, teachers can share their experiences, learn from one another. And the big thing is that we have also said in Finland that we have very good teachers. But the big thing is that when you know that you're good in your profession, are you so good that you're able to let go that you would have all the right answers and learn new things? And that's a big thing in the professional identity, to let go and open your identity to learning new things. The second thing I would like to take up is that what is the challenge that we have found is that the interconnection between well-being of the children and learning of the children is becoming much more important. That what we're noticing is that if we don't take care of the well-being, the learning won't be there. If the child has not had a breakfast, he or she will not learn properly that day. And that's something that we have to find solutions to. There are more and more also in Finland, the children are experiencing mental challenges, and aggressive behavior and all that. And it's not only teachers, but it's the whole school community and other professionals also working together that we must find solutions to help that kind of situations.
Thank you, Olli-Pekka. And just coming back to your earlier comments on scale, I want to bring Valerie in. Is this the right question or not?
Thanks, Tom. I entirely agree with Olli-Pekka that talking about scale is the wrong question. It's a mechanistic metaphor, which is not helpful with the phenomenon that we're talking about. We're talking about, I believe, trying to move massive systems globally from an old paradigm of the 19th, 20th century to the 21st. And I recall so clearly Andrea saying some years ago that trying to move education systems is like trying to shift graveyards. It's enormously difficult and resilient. And I think we need a really sharp and smart theory of change if we as a community can leverage what's been talked about over the last couple of days to shift these systems in the direction that we think is important. So I want to suggest that there are 4 elements to that theory of change, 4 parts to a strategy, if you like, and I hope very much that we can take them up in the continuation of this dialogue wherever we might be together or apart. 4 parts to it then. First is narrative creation. And I don't think yet we have got the narrative right for the change. I just think that the whole issue of story and the narrative we tell really cannot be overestimated. I'm going to start that piece with the importance of politicians in this. We've had some gratuitous insults levelled at ministers of education during this conference. I want to dissociate myself from them because there are smart ones, there are silly ones, but they are all terribly important because they set a tone and a tenor for what matters, what education is for. And I'll give you a short vignette. I had cause recently to interview for a piece of research a New Zealand head teacher. And she said, I'll never forget what Hekia Parata said when she took office. And she said, our education needs to be ancestrally grounded, future-focused. And that head teacher said that has shifted everything we've done because it's given us permission and the scope to make the changes that we really understand are important in terms of fostering identity. Now, politicians set the tone, but they're not the only people who do. And the questioner, I forget where she is now, I think it was you, who asked the question, why? The narrative has to be around, what is education for? And the old narrative, implicitly, it's tacitly, it's rarely really spelled out. So Charlie Strip spelled it out. Most governments work on the assumption that education is for furthering the economy, making more competitive economies. And that is just not sufficient anymore. It will not do. But actually that is tacitly the implication of what they do, what they enable, and what they honour in their systems. Well, we have to move beyond that. We have to create a completely new narrative, which is about the 21st century conditions. It doesn't mean say economies aren't important, but if and only if they are green economies. If and only if the narrative shifts our understanding of how we are in relationship to our planet and to each other and how we create thriving societies. This, if you like, is about building the public will. We have to build the public will for the shift. And politicians have to be in that. It would be great if these conferences, with all due respect to past ministers, could include people who aspire to be ministers, who are upcoming in their parties, and can have a kind of a new vocabulary, a new way of thinking about all this. So that's point 1, narrative. Point 2 is around coherent frameworks. We have to have frameworks for this which are really academically rigorous, which hold together, which are coherent, which are research-based. And I think the OECD, in its Education 2030 framework, has done a massive service to us all in creating one. There are others, they're not in competition, I think they're complementary. What Christopher Pomeranning set out today was another. They fit very well together. A piece of work I've done recently in research on learning frameworks, design frameworks across the world creates another. These things are starting to become coherent, but we must have those frameworks, as you said, Olli-Pekka, to give people confidence. This is not a complete detachment from what's gone before, it's a massive build. It's a build. So the coherent frameworks, I think, are the second part of the theory of change. The third is getting a spotlight on a critical mass of great, great practice. And thank God we've now got it. We heard about some of it today from Christopher. We've got 100 here. Is Saku still here? Anyway, Saku is shining a great light from Finland across the world about the great practice which is evolving. You've got Big Picture, you've got High Tech High, honoured this year at the World Innovation Summit. So we're getting a critical mass, and what we need to be doing is treating them as our lighthouses, as our beacons, as the people who can show us how this works really, really well. It's not experimental anymore. The evidence is there, and we need to use those as examples from which we can act and learn and use as our critical mass. And here's my third point. I will just say one thing in terms of where business comes in here too, and the kind of model that Christopher's got for going to a larger scale, and that's the old adage from Buckminster Fuller, I'm sure you all know it, who said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model, and make the existing model obsolete. So that's the critical mass piece, and here's my final, and I'll sit down. Thank you for the time that you've given me. My final point is this. We have got to draw into this movement, this shift, this fight, if you like, the agency of young people, young learners. I can't believe that we've got to this point in the conference and we haven't channeled the spirit of Greta Thunberg, who arguably is one of the most influential people in education today. Think about what she's achieved. Now, if we could channel that kind of agency, we would get a rocket behind this whole movement, I think. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Valerie. So, are there any volunteers to be the next Greta Thunberg? But for education, please do step forward. We need you badly. Can I come to Danny? Where's Danny? Danny, are you the next Greta Thunberg? Sure. Excellent, excellent.
As long as everyone joins me in that effort, I feel like we are only as strong as our weakest link. So collaboratory, multi-stakeholder consensus is definitely appreciated and needed. Just to talk a little bit about, how do we scale these new programs? I think that business needs education and education needs business. And by using strengths-based leadership, we can hopefully create a ecosystem between the two. So we break down those barriers of living in these silos or ivory towers, as you say, but also address what each one is good at. So I heard earlier an individual talk about how working in education in the private sector, things moved very fast. And I myself, who's often worked in the private sector, found that things can move at a really fast pace and you can create a lot of change, and that's really wonderful. Yet at the same time, what I think is so powerful about education is that it has structures and mechanisms in order to take time and pause for reflection and monitor those systems. And so if we can create an ecosystem where we dissolve this barrier between the businesses and education and truly value each one for what their strengths are, that way I see us moving forward together. And unfortunately, we have to always mention climate in this conversation because I think that is going to be the thing that overpowers both business and education. It has to be a central focus in every single thing we do. And last but not least, I think addressing equality by inclusion of many different perspectives is really the path forward. So insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So I think this forum is one example of diverse perspectives coming together and paving truly a sustainable path forward. And I'm excited to work with all of you on that.
Thank you. Brilliant. I think that's a perfect moment then to bring in John on exactly that question about how then do we join those dots between education and employers? What are your takeaways from these last 2 days?
Well, I think pick up on a couple comments that have been made this morning that I think are relevant, and then talk about how that connects to your question. I'm struck by Meta, who talked about wanting to see more connection between what's happening in the classrooms and schools into real world life and real world experiences. And I heard, I think Jesse talk about the importance of kind of practical empowerment, how to, in a very rapidly changing world and economy, how to practically equip youth to be able to lead and succeed. And I also have heard a number of people here talk about think about the system change, the systems that need to be reinvented. And so I guess to me, I think we have a near-term challenge of making practical improvements in schools, in classrooms in the next year, 2, 3 years that are going to be in the context of the current systems. But to get at your question, I think what we are hearing in this conference is going to require, and what I think Andreas and OECD is pushing us toward, in my view, is a real innovation in thinking about what the new systems of the future will look like that will, in fact, help accomplish what Meta and Jesse are asking for in terms of really connecting directly what's happening in learning to practically what's needed to empower for real-world work in the workplace and beyond. And I guess I would say that in the United States, what we look at, I'd say the system as we defined it, the K-12 system, has become too narrow, given the scope of the challenge that we're trying to address in these comments. That at one point, I guess from the United States context at least, for the last 100 years, we had seen getting through high school and a high school diploma being the key to help a young person be able to unlock their future in terms of being able to make a life for their family, get ahead economically, be equipped to be an effective citizen. And we know the world's changed dramatically. In 1973 in the United States, only 1 in 4 jobs required anything more than a high school education. And in the last decade, nearly about 95% of the good new jobs require education that goes beyond high school. It's both a higher bar and it's a different bar and it's a differentiated bar. But the diploma from high school used to be the key gateway. So if you got the K-12 system addressed, you could then get the link between youth and economic opportunity and life opportunity and employers. But with these shifts, now that it's going to be post-high school, it's going to be the K-12 system. It's the post-secondary system, which has been referred to a bit during this conference, in need of reinvention. It's employers, the employers, both employers need and how they're cultivating and developing and supporting learning on the employers. And I think the new systems need to be some kind of reinvention of how K-12 and post-secondary and employers and companies in very practical, fast ways can actually create opportunities for progression for students, for learners, to be able to, through high school, through college, through employment, advance toward new and evolving jobs and other real work. And I would say in the United States, at least, we are suffering from trying to get different systems to make incremental change within the systems and collaborate. And what we need to do is think about what are the new systems that may look very different, that combine all those, which have the competencies defined that people are getting at here, but in very practical ways with gateways and metrics along the way, so that a student can just have predictable pathways to opportunity going through high school, going through post-secondary, going through workforce, coming back to post-secondary. The ideas of lifelong learning are not going to work without a reinvented system. And so I think the challenge being on the table here is at least pushing me, and I don't know what this looks like in the United States, but I know we need to figure it out, what that reinvented system can look like. And I think that's going to involve some very practical choices. It's going to involve policymakers, yes, the ministers of education, whom I did defend yesterday. I think that the ministers of education play crucial roles. I think what maybe the comment yesterday was coming from, perhaps, was from a sense that the ministers of education can't alone do this. So the question is, how do you think about the employers? I'm so glad to see more employers here, and the post-secondary institutions, and how do you bring them together in a way that's very practically changing policy, growing new kinds of institutions to really create that systems change? And I think if this community can think in very hard-nosed, pragmatic ways about the innovating new systems, I know that's what we need in the United States to deliver on this, and if we don't, I'll just stop here. I'm fearful that the concepts that people are raising here and the aspirations and even the values we're trying to achieve to won't be solved unless we kind of figure this out. And there's no current single institution or system to do to solve that, which is why the system innovation, I think, is the crucial thing to link education to employers, but also education to economic and life opportunity.
And can I just push you on this thought about gateways and pathways then that you're developing there? Can you give us a sense of what the young person's journey would be then in the future?
As an example, I mean, so, yeah, the purpose of education we talked a lot about here, for civic leadership engagement, for human learning, but a big part of that is for economic empowerment, to make a good life for oneself. Which, by the way, given the changing economy, a lot of the skills that we're seeing from employers needed for success in the workplace are the same kind of creative problem solving and other skills needed for citizenship too. So I don't think looking at employer-defined skills should be looked at as a way that's divorced from life opportunity citizenship. It's actually those things that employers are asking for in a 21st century economy are in some ways some of the same things with grounded in a very practical technical knowledge. So I don't want to be reductive about this, but if you ask a gateway, so if a high school student, high school junior says they've got a passion for a career in technology and cybersecurity or in health, I think if we had gateways and metrics that worked across systems, I think a student, in some places, Switzerland and others we heard, I think is pioneering some of this, but we ought to be able to make a choice to be able to get a foundation that's going to be good for any career, but begin to get the specific foundational experiences in high school that are aligned to what employers need, not just for the initial job, but for a career in that pathway, and then earn the academic credits that would allow the student efficiently to move forward in post-secondary, even while they're in high school, and the employer-defined credentials that when they leave high school, ought to give them a ticket to a good job, and ought to give a ticket to a credit in universities that they could then continue that education seamlessly. And, by the way, then if you go into the workforce, there ought to be systems which you don't have in the US for the most part today, where if you progress in that career and you go up for the initial cybersecurity job to the next one, you ought to simultaneously be able to keep getting credit in the post-secondary institution for the work you're doing in the workplace and in the education institution, so you can keep getting progress toward higher and higher levels of jobs and careers in that sector. And I think that we have to reinvent the way employers work with education to do that. I think we need clear gateways and metrics and credentials in many cases. I think there are big questions, and I'll stop in a moment, but I think I'm grappling with, the United States we're grappling. Some people would say, let's have defined credentials across sectors that would allow employers to say, hey, we'll hire based on that. I think that's valuable. At the same time, I worry that because this economy is changing so fast, if we rely too much on processes just to define credentials in areas like tech and cybersecurity and fast-moving white-collar work, some employers are telling us they don't know if those credentials work. So I don't know how you do this, but I think the student should experience from high school to post-secondary to work, back to learning, an opportunity to keep earning credits and progression toward careers in a set of systems that we don't have today.
Yeah.
Can
But
I
blockchain
comment?
may be part of the answer at some point.
Can I
Heike.
comment on that? Because I absolutely agree. I think that one of the leapfrogs, or the terms that we need to be using in terms of, as Valerie said, building out the systems, not just jettisoning everything that we've already got. I think one of the central things we need to do is not just talk about student agency, but student choice, and then create the conditions in which those choices can actually be made. And one of the most boring, but I think powerful pieces of infrastructure in any education system is the National Qualifications Framework. And so the very point you're making, John, I think that from my observation, most national qualification frameworks are still organised on what the academic pathways are up the 8 or 10 choices, and then the applied learning, as I prefer to call it, because TVET is still seen as being somehow inferior to an academic pathway, that if we, and to take your point, that we don't know exactly which qualification will last for which work area, I think that we should be responding to what is already occurring, which is people building customised, personalised portfolios of micro-qualifications. But they're doing that as well as having to fulfil full degrees or full academic qualifications because those universities are set up that way. When actually, theoretically, there is no reason, if you have accredited particular standards at particular levels of NQF, that you can't, a bit like Snakes and Ladders, if anybody knows that board game, actually build across the entire framework the qualification that you are passionate about and that suits you for either an existing labour market opportunity, a putative labour market opportunity, or one that you're going to design yourself. And for that multiplicity of opportunities, which we're told time and again, we don't know exactly what jobs are going to be available, will match the education imperative that we should be focused as much on values and dispositions and competencies as on subject knowledge, because then you can matrix as a student with agency and choice the range that you want to build the qualification and set of skills that you think will give you the best pathway in life. And that is a function of the convergence of employers saying the sort of things they're interested in, the work determining the kinds of skills and the levels at which they need to be present, but truly personalised to the student, to the learner, the lifelong learner, and their passion. Because the great thing about passion as the fuel is that A, you will get better and better at whatever it is. And secondly, in terms of well-being, you will just be a nicer, happier person to be around. And those are things that I think we should absolutely harness to this architecture that almost, well, all systems have invested in, but most of them protect the current provider's status and the current prescription of what you need to have this kind of law degree or that. And so people can spend 10 years getting 3 degrees when they really only wanted this part of that and that part and that part. Anyway, I'm just saying, if we keep talking about agency but we don't actually create the pathways where you can exercise agency, it's like saying to people, you've got the right to do this, but the conditions don't exist for you to exercise the right. Yeah, so there you go.
Thank you. And I want now to go to Li Zong to come in. Actually, on the back of John's experience in the States, how does it look to you in Shanghai? What are the key concepts that we should be talking about coming out of these 2 days?
Okay. Talk about gateway. Can I just say a few words to introduce my institution, NYU Shanghai? So people maybe ask whether it's a New York University in Shanghai. Yes and no. Actually, NYU Shanghai is the first Sino-American joint university and also part of NYU Global Network. So actually, during the last 20 years, NYU worked very hard to try to build up a global network. So this is what the president of NYU think about. They should build up the higher education on the multicultural environment or on the base of the multicultural. So for the last 20 years, there's NYU built up 3, they call the Portal campus. One is in New York, one is in Abu Dhabi, and then Shanghai. So you see the 3 different main cultures around the world: Christian culture and the Islam culture, and also the Lu Jiao, what's called English name, Confucius, okay? And also one is in the Western country, one is in the Middle East, and one is in the Far East. So apart from these 3 Portal campus, there are another 11 study sites, including one in Paris. Of course, London, Berlin, or, it's lots of all these continental, they have a study site. So you can consider about this kind of framework, why NYU doing that? This is the experimental of the higher education under this kind of environment, the modern society. So if we talk about the pathway or gateway of the change education, I think at least there are 4 different layers. The first layer is we call it curriculums or the textbook, or maybe all the content-based of the education. Because we are now facing a rapid change of the world, whatever the knowledge, skill, and also the attitude, the students have to change during the process of the learning. So this change is, we should concern about the globalization. So we have introduced the words, the global competence. And also we should consider about the rapid development of the information science, especially recent year about the data science or the big data and the artificial intelligence. All this idea is introduced in the different areas. It changes our life and it changes our work and also changes our education. So we have to change our curriculums to meet the change of the world. So this is the first layer. The second layer, I think is also important, is about teacher development and also the teacher method. If we still, insist the way of the teaching 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it's not fit to the modern technology development. And it's not fit to the idea, the modern thinking about education. So the change of the education, the second layer, we should consider about the teacher development or the faculty development in the university, and also the way of the teaching. And the third is about the models, or we call it education model or learning model, anyway, it should be diverse. Because individual students are so different, and the requirement of the business in different position or in the different level also different. So no single model can be fit to all the people. No single model can fit to all the job needs. So the model of the education should be very different. We not use a new model instead of the old model. We have to develop a different kind of models to fit to the society and to fit to each individuals. So I think today we have talked about vocational education. It's very important if you tend to be the job-orientated, the education, the vocational education. I think this is it's really a practical models, for. And if we train the engineer, I think the engineer should be more specifically to training. But if we want to train the leaders in different areas, that is another kind of model. The NY Shanghai is the model to training the leaders in different areas, So how to improve the training models or improve the cultivated, the talents models? This is, I think maybe should be a main concern about the change of the education. We, in NY Shanghai specifically, we emphasized the learning is not only in the classroom. I think traditionally people talk about education, talk about the learning, or talk about the study. I think the first impression is we sitting in the classroom and listen to what the lecturer say or the teacher say, or maybe we sitting in the classroom, we have a discussion. But I think not only, the learning is not only happening in the classroom. Everywhere we can learn. The cultural experience, the social observation, and the research practice, and even talk, people-to-people talk, is the way of the learning. So for NY Shanghai, we arranged the student dorms. It must be one Chinese student and one international student, because in NY Shanghai, half students is from China, half students is from every countries around the world. So now we have, I think, 83 different countries. The students from, 83 different countries. So the people in the dorms, 24 hours interaction. This is the way to learn different culture, learn the thought of different people, because they grow up in different cultural environment and they have a different experience of the education background. So this is a way to learn each other. So learning methods, the learning is not only happening in the classroom, everywhere we can learn. But the most important is we have the concept about the learning, how to use all the, the possibilities to learn everything. It's useful for their own development. So this is the third layer. The fourth layer, I think it's maybe the most important, is the concept of education, or the idea of the education. Maybe we can use the value of the education. We should understand that all the system, education system now existing, is developed based on the industry period. Although it changes quite a lot for the last 100 years, but basically, school, the class, and all these things is, because of the industrialization, and everything is standard. We talk about the standard. We talk about how to use the standard to evaluate the education. So this is the idea of the industrialization. But now is the digital period. Although something is still fit to today, but whether everything is fit to the digital period, no, I think it's definitely not. So we have to think about the transformation of the education. And first, we change the idea, the understanding of the education. So I think the lady has talked about, for the government, they think more about education is how to fit to the society, to the business or something like that. But the education originally It's think about the people. It's benefit to the people, to benefit to their growth. So I think that the top layer, we have to, if we want to change our education system, the first way we should realize today is different to yesterday. Our education system have to be reformed. So this is something I think about the change of the education. It's so important. So this forum is really, it's the time to discuss about how to change it, how to make it a better future of the education.
Thank you. And can I come back to your clap? Yes. Let's have a round of applause. Thank you. You're right, John. Can I just get back to you on your point on global competence in particular, because I hope this is something that we can also hear from Andreas later on where the OECD will be going on global competence. Yeah. How do you react to the suggestion, and it came from a recent British Prime Minister, that a global citizen is a citizen of nowhere? And how do you ensure that the education systems to create and nurture global citizens are not somehow counterproductive in the long term in this polarizing period?
Yeah, I understand. Actually, today, the world is become more and more small because all the countries, all the different cultures is connected to each other. So if changes in this side, it will be, have some response on another side. So I think the global competence is necessary for the modern citizen. Although they belong to one country, they have a citizenship in one country. But we talk about the global citizen is not deal with the country. This is the concern or the visions of a people. They're living in this earth. So the global competence is including the vision, the global visions. They understand the world consists of a different kind of culture. Culture is different, but we are human being. Human being has lots of commonalities. So as a global citizen, they should be recognized, appreciate the different culture, but more important, to find the common points as a human being. And also, as a global citizen, they should be actively concerned and involved to solve the global issues, because this issue is not only belong to one country, it's belong to the world. So everyone have the responsibility, our social responsibility, to make the solution of the global issues.
Thank you. As a diplomat, I strongly reinforce that point. I'm going to come back to Heikki then. We started off yesterday on PISA. What is all? Okay, we'll go to John then first, then come on, and then Heikki on what this all means for PISA.
Sorry, what you're sharing, I would love to make a comment on, but I'd also have to ask Heikki, what you had a quote that was mentioned earlier that was relevant. Ancestrally, what was the?
Ancestrally based, future focused.
Ancestrally based.
Or ancestrally anchored. It's just you're grounded in your local, who you are and where you come from. You're not alone. You're part of a lineage of people who, you are the current representative of. And from that strength...
Would you give us a microphone, Heikki, for this bit?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you finished? Okay.
So you're saying ancestrally grounded, part of a people, and then forward, leaning and forward. And I just want to comment on this. I live in the United States, and we're in, like other places, are in an intense political context right now. And I do think that there is a need for global future citizenship and collaboration. At the same time, I think we ignore the ancestrally, in some cases, in the United States case, more a set of ideas across backgrounds but being grounded in our local context, I think is crucial. And I think that we go to the needed global citizenship and forward informed at our peril if we don't look at how do we then ground it in kind of an understanding of where we in our different countries come from. And so I think globally informed, future informed, but ancestrally, or in the United States, ideas, getting closer to our ideals of liberty and equal opportunity, and being a people that has tried to get closer to that over time at our best, and opening our doors at our best for people across the world who work hard to get ahead. And I think we need to have both of those. And just, I think one of the values question has come up in this conference. I think it's very important. And I don't know, again, we're in a difficult political context in some ways in the United States and elsewhere too. But I think in education, one of the things I've noticed that maybe is relevant that we've been trying to learn from is that when I look at other countries that have made progress, and this is I don't know this is an emerging hypothesis. It seems to me that some of the education systems that made the most progress have been grounded, yes, toward the future and toward a global citizenship, but also built on values and kind of a local aspirational identity for who people want to be in that country. And whether it's in Finland, where you kind of built your work over the last few decades in a whole social equity agenda around trying to create a fairer society, and where you had, for centuries of domination by the Russians and Swedes, you had a Finnish literature asset that you then helped teachers really become teachers around Finnish literature to help, in my view, when I went to Finland, we're helping teachers and students become more Finnish because we're making a more equitable country, and we're helping students master Finnish literature more. And when I was in Switzerland, I was very impressed in Switzerland with the Swiss apprenticeship program, very impressed, and we're looking at how to adapt that in the United States. But I also saw in Switzerland, for centuries I would hear people say, yeah, well, there's this respect for the maestro in the workplace, and how do you actually help more and more people have that mastery, an advanced mastery in the workplace? In the United States, I've been asking ourselves a bit, what are our, not in a way that's exclusive, but inclusive, what are our kind of best values and aspirational identity in the United States that if we build our education system around, we're not be exactly like Finland, we're not going to be exactly like Singapore, Shanghai, or Switzerland. What are ours, and I feel like at our best, in the United States, at our best, we're not always there, we're ultimately about, regardless of background, skin color, where you're from, if you work hard, you can innovate, you can solve problems, you can act more on the world with agency than the world acts on you. It seems to me that in the United States, if we can build an education system that more reflects those values and aspirations, the way that Finland and Switzerland and Singapore seems to me have built on values, that may help both practically make progress connected to our economy, might give people a more sense of identity. Yeah, this is who we are as Americans in an inclusive way, but in a way that's mindful of being global citizenship. And so this is an emerging hypothesis, and I'd be interested in other thoughts on that, or after this conference, other thoughts, because I do feel like missing this local context, even while we're looking toward global citizenship, and missing that local aspirational identity that will ground and inspire people to work together toward that, I think we do at our peril.
Right. Thank you. Heike, can you comment on what this means for PISA?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, what this means for PISA is this is a great jumping off point, this exact discussion, because the question that you posed, Tom, about the British Prime Minister saying global citizens are citizens of nowhere, that's only if you define it that way. But this idea that we all come from diverse and distinct and unique and special and rich cultural backgrounds that provide the context within which we develop our particular local identity is a contribution to the global world of which we are also citizens. And I think that one of the things, one of the challenges for PISA, which I highly valued as Minister of Education, I didn't value the political turmoil that it would create about, had you done your job well enough to be reflecting, an upward trend in PISA. But what it did and does provide is this, triennial, objective, international set of assessments that give you an indication of the trend for your country and your country in comparison to other countries. And we already had a debate yesterday, or at least there was a discussion, actually I think it was you, John, where you were rejecting the suggestion, and I totally agree with you, that it's either academic or it's what people are characterising as soft skills and so forth. I absolutely am a believer in the possibility of abundance, of the ability for all people, individuals and communities, to be able to realise their aspirations, to mind their own potential, and to do it in ways that are congruent and reflective of the distinctiveness of Finland, of the United States, of India, of China, of New Zealand, of all of us. And in so doing, we continue to enrich the mosaic of our global world. This planet that we all are committed, and Greta Thunberg is currently illuminating that commitment's not enough, practice must also follow, which of course is equally true in education. So in terms of PISA, I think that one of the challenges for PISA is not only to maintain what I think of as the kind of baseline bedrock of being literate, being numerate, and being aware of what objective science tells us about what can be repeated in order to get the kinds of outcomes we need. But in addition, and so we've had these different series around financial literacy, around digitalisation, and you indicated, Andreas, that the next one will look at creative thinking and so forth. But I do think that a challenge for PISA is to try and respond to one of the aspirations that has come through consistently in this gathering over the past 2 days, which is this notion of our essential humanness. You know, what are the characteristics of that? How do we ensure that we continue to aspire to be the best versions of ourselves, to be first-rate human beings and not second-rate robots? And that means these, I don't know whether you would, I know that assessment always has this kind of pejorative, and that's usually because we're talking about, you know, those over-examined use of the word. But assessment is a way of giving us really good real-time feedback. In any case, I'm starting to sound, I think that one of the challenges for PISA is to maintain that bedrock, and in addition, to be looking at how do we strengthen through PISA and give feedback on this kind of values-based humanness of us, and the idea that we are whole human beings where arts and literature and kindness and compassion and civic responsibility, social justice, fairness, all of these kinds of values that we think are important, and the practices that they are reflected in, whether it's a beautiful artwork or installation or piece of music or poetry or a wonderful garden and the ability to harvest and so forth. Whatever those are, I think that somehow that's the next challenge for PISA, because we cannot talk about education needs to change for the future and that not change some of the very strong feedback mechanisms. I described PISA yesterday as the pulse of the global pulse of education, and I firmly believe that, and I think that the question was subsequently asked of, well, which heartbeat? Well, we've only got one. You know, it's the heartbeat of what makes us whole people in the context of the cultures and identities, the languages, those things that make us special and unique in the world, and allow us, when we are well-grounded, to not be defensive about the difference of others. And I think this is the basis of most conflict in the world, is that when we are not absolutely certain and secure about who we are and where we fit, we are very defensive about the strength of someone else's identity. And so those are hard things, but PISA's tackled hard things, you know, and some of the best minds in education have been deployed in the service of PISA. And so for its continuing relevance for all of us, I think that that's a next step that we really need to tackle, because otherwise we will continue to be using assessments and frameworks that were built for the system we're saying is no longer fully serving the future of education that we all think is absolutely essential. So I'm both thanking the OECD, you personally, Andreas, for PISA, but also challenging and inviting that we now move on to a next step. And I'm also recognising it is not exclusive. It is one mechanism, tool for us, and the frameworks Valerie was commending and others have also spoken about. It's an and. It's an and. It's not an either or. So that's what I think. Thomas?
Thank you. So we're going to get a chance to hear Andreas's summing up and reaction, because so many of the answers to these questions seems to be Andreas. But before we move to you, Andreas, what I would love to do is bring in our colleague from UNESCO, Sobi Tawi, and then Martin Henry from Education International, and then we'll pass to Andreas and Mr. Wang to really bring all this together for us. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, our Assistant Director General for Education, Stefania Giannini, is in Tunisia or on her way back, and I'm stepping in for her. But thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Andreas, for the opportunity to provide just some thoughts given these 2 days, 2 intensive days of discussion. And I'd like to make perhaps 4 points. First, I mean, we've been talking last 2 days about how education needs to be transformed in the 21st century. And one of the first speakers yesterday did remind us that from a historical point of view, I mean, we have to give the industrial school model credit for having transformed the learning landscape. In 1830, 20% of the population of the planet were literate, 80% were non-literate. By 150 years later, that had been reversed and 80% of the population was literate. We do have today the most educated, informed generation of youth that the world has ever seen. But there's an agreement that this model is no longer fit for purpose. And not fit for purpose and needs to be transformed for 2 main reasons. And we've been looking at this over the past 2 days. First, our changing relation to information and knowledge in the digital age. And it's more than how we learn and how we access information, but the internet, the smartphone, and now big data and machine learning is changing the way we communicate, changing the way we work, changing the way we practice citizenship. And this has implications for what we learn, for how we learn, for how we assess and validate learning and knowledge. It also has implications for how learning systems need to be organized and managed. But there's a second reason why education needs to be transformed in the 21st century, and we began with this, a world of increasing complexity, uncertainty, and fragility. Uncertainties about the future of work, but also uncertainties about developments around climate change, around growing inequalities, around rising populism, shrinking civil society space. There's a range of considerations that are both obviously challenges and perhaps opportunities for us to be transforming education. So that's just the first point to place in context, perhaps in the longer term context. But the second point is that much of the discussion on the transformation of education and learning for the 21st century is a discussion that is produced and located in the North. And it's based on the assumption that there is universal or near universal access to basic education and to foundational skills. And this is not the case in many parts of the global South. We do have the figures of the learning crisis, almost 6 out of 10 young people who are unable to read at a minimal level of proficiency. We have the figures on out-of-school children and youth. We have figures on, and we heard that in reference, I believe, to New Zealand, but globally, we have upper secondary completion rates of less than 50%. Less than 1 in 2 of our high school students on world average are dropping out, being pushed out, are disengaged from education. So we do have, in much of the global South, unrealized promises of universal basic education that we have from the last century. And at the same time, societies in the global South are faced with the transformation that is needed for the 21st century. So what I'm saying is societies in the global South need to navigate both. It's 1 foot in the last century and trying to fulfill the promises of universal basic education, while at the same time another foot in the 21st century and looking at the need for transformation in a changing environment. My third point is to say that we have talked about education needing to transform basically in order to adapt to change and to uncertainty about the future. But this is basically about adapting to probable futures based on current trends and projections. There is room to be thinking about education needing to transform, not only to adapt to this world, but also to transform the world around us. So it's not only adapting to probable futures, but it's maybe transforming education so that we can create the possible futures, alternative, preferred futures that we want. And in doing this, this is what UNESCO has just launched in its Futures of Education initiative. It is about visioning, it is about the type of society that we want, and how education, knowledge, learning can help get us there. And we do that at key historical junctures. Many of you may be familiar with the Delors report, the 4 pillars of learning, this integrated approach. This was in the mid-90s. But now, in this second decade of the 21st century, despite the 2030 agenda on sustainable development and its ambitious scope, we are also at a historical juncture that merits that we lift our heads and consider the bigger picture. And my last point is about reaffirming and needing, and we've heard it in different ways, a humanistic approach to education and to learning. What that means is a recognition that there are different perceptions of well-being, different approaches to development, different knowledge systems that need to be respected in their diversity, while reaffirming a common core of values that we share around respect for life, human dignity, respect for diversity. That equity should be the main policy focus, that our approaches to education must be integrated. In other words, recognizing the multiple individual and collective purposes of education. Yes, it is about work, but it's also about civic, social dimensions. It's also about personal development. And recognizing that learning is lifelong and life-wide. We've heard it in different ways. It's formal education institutions, but I believe today there's a growing recognition to what we always knew, that learning is not confined to formal education institutions. But today I believe that there is a growing recognition that these other spaces, work-based, community engagements as a learning experience, are all important. And finally, that the role of teachers and educators are central. And you can judge a society and measure how much it cares about its children and youth by the attention it gives to its teachers and to its educators more broadly.
Thank you very much. And then over to you, Martin Henry from Education International.
Thanks, Tom. The future of education, well, being an old classicist, I'm going to go back to the word educare, that actually it means to follow and to mould. And having been shaped by Mouldy also, I'm going to bring in the concept of ARCO, that you mould students, but students mould you. And the relationship between teachers and students is central to what we're all here for. There are 3 pillars to the way we're going to help in the future of education have a better system. That's to have a well-resourced systemic education system where everyone talks to each other, both within the country and across countries. We've shown leadership, as have OECD, in setting up the international ISTP, where teacher unionists, OECD, and ministers of education sit down together and plan how they're going to undo the wicked problems that they find in their systems and how they're going to alter and mould and follow an educational path for the future. We know that that's the way to make it work. You can't do it with one group not speaking to the other. And I will say that student agency and teacher agency also go hand in hand, as the OECD 2030 project has shown us. You need a relationship with teacher unions and school communities, and evaluation and accountability structures alone won't do it. It doesn't raise self-efficacy. Fear trumps that. And when you look at an environment, a way of working that is focused on a fear incentive, you're not going to get the educational response that you need. And I think you've got to be really clear with yourselves, both as countries and as educators, that that's a critical thing that you have to wrestle with. The third pillar is having a high level of self-efficacy for your teachers. For that to happen, they've got to be paid properly, they've got to have decent contracts, and they've got to be based on professional standards. And we've just developed an international framework with UNESCO of professional standards, because teacher professionalism has got to be led by us. Teachers have to be at the centre of that discussion. If they're not involved and it's being put upon them, you're not going to get the results you need, because we all know that teachers have to walk through the classroom with the students to make it work. IT is an area in which humanity has choices, and I do support the work OECD has done on artificial intelligence. They've come up with an ethical framework that is human-centred and looks at how human beings can be at the centre of our technological future. And while students, clearly from the PISA results, spend a lot of time online, it doesn't mean that they've disappeared into a virtual world. They actually live in the real one with us. So we've got to make sure that we're aware of how we mould that technology. We can't have the technology moulding us. And I will refer to Andreas's report, because he talks there about algorithms and how they define the Twitter sphere. We can't be shaped by an algorithm. We have to be acting in the real world with real ideas in a way that's going to create positive change. And I will talk as well about the basics of democracy, which are pluracy. That means that as well as talking to each other, and we've all had chances to talk a bit while we've been here, we've also got to listen. And that's something that is a two-way process, going back to that concept of ARCO, where we are actually responding and shaping the way that we listen to each other and think about each other's ideas. I can't go on without talking about the spread of populism, which at this point in human history is a real concern. It's a base of fear and division, and good school systems should be a defence against this. We must have respect for truth and the role that teachers play in this, in promoting civilised values within our societies at the centre of the discussion. And again, I think the OECD's 2030 project acknowledges that. I think much of the work that OECD does acknowledges that. You have to have a relationship with the people who are moving the systems in front of you. Teacher learning has got to be integral to that, and many of you have talked about PLD. You cannot have a teacher profession that is given a once-over rinse and a few days of training and then put into a classroom and us to expect that that's going to have the right response, because it won't. We need well-qualified teachers who've got good, solid education programs that teach them, and we have to have them trained throughout their career. So we've talked about lifelong learning. Cradle to the grave learning has to be available for everybody, not just for teachers, but for everybody in society. And the role that qualified teachers play in making that happen is absolutely central. IT was a central debate for us at our Congress in Bangkok this year, and the issues that came up around that question, artificial intelligence, we were definitely led, if not sometimes nudged, by our American unions in this debate, and they were very clear about the impact. However, from my travels, my experience of Hong Kong and Korea and other places is that the way that technology works in the Far East is quite different again. And we have to be aware of the different technological integrations and approaches, because when I teach in Wainuiomata, it is not the same as when I teach in Leeds, in Seacroft. We've got to be clear about where we are, and we've got to shape our educational experiences based on our communities. So it's going to be positive for teachers if they have an influence on the technology they're using. If you dump technology on them, or even worse, you allow technological companies to do that for you, you're not going to have the ability for teachers to choose and shift what they think and how they're going to use it. The future of work is an issue that's been taken up by another multinational organisation up the road in Geneva, which is the International Labour Organization. And they came up with a superb report on this, where they talked about productive capabilities. Now, I'd like us to think about moving on from a discussion of competencies, which are quite a binary, yes or no, I've got it or I haven't, into an area of thinking about competencies, about capabilities. It's a more positive framing, and it's a way that we can think about the capabilities a student has. And we've got a TVET report which explores that. The teacher identity issue also, which has been brought up by many of you, we've done research on this in Sweden, Scotland, Singapore, Kenya, Ontario, Berlin and Chile, and we looked at comparing how teacher identities worked in those different places. What we discovered is that PLD, the professional learning communities that teachers are part of and involved with, are central to those identities, whatever the country and whatever the approach. So if you're not investing in a state infrastructure around PLD, you've got a problem. And the reason we went to Singapore, as our Singaporean colleague spoke to us yesterday, is because they have such a solid, well thought out, well invested, well resourced system. And we believe that all teachers should have access to that. Online learning only works for educated people. That's been a finding that OECD have been throwing around for a number of years now. So we can't have an online learning that's accessible to the rich and not the poor. We've got to think about how we're going to open up our education system so that they're accessible for everyone. A values basis is crucial, and it's been really heartening to hear all the talk of values here. And I want to finish and round off on the point that equity matters. We know from PISA and from the work that's been done in multinational assessments that unless you're clear about the students who are struggling in your system, unless you can see them, unless you know who they are, then you can't have an impact on them. So you're going to have that impact through your teachers. So you've got to work with us to make that happen. And it's not fear, but optimism and confidence that will shape the future. Teachers provide this when their status is supported by society through decent paying conditions, when their professionalism is trusted, when we don't just grab for shiny things, when policymakers walk hand in hand with teachers, and when teachers walk hand in hand with students. Then we'll have a brighter future.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you very much, Martin, for that upbeat note to then bring in Andreas. As we say, you're in the eye of the hurricane here, Andreas. What are your takeaways from these 2 days?
Well, for a start, I want to thank you and also Tian Wei for the amazing ways in which you have drawn so many voices in this important conversation. I really think that's a kind of just great example of how to lead this forward. The most important takeaway for me is actually very simple. When you bring young leaders into a discussion on the future of education, it seems actually not that difficult to reach agreement on what education should be like, what is needed in the field. And I think that's something I want to thank you, the young leaders, for engaging in this discussion. That is complicated, that is slow, that is full of vested interests. Don't lose your patience with us on this. Jack Ma touched the heart of this, really, when he said we should make education less a farm, more like a zoo. I really like that, bring out the features that make every person special, not focus on the one that make us similar. Or take Hikia this morning, and it's the same point. How do we get from numbers to names to individual needs? That is the future of education. How can we become better at respecting the identity and context and culture of every learner? I also thought Princess Laurentine spoke along very similar lines. When the example she gave of, the handshake that a student receives in the morning and the look in the eye is so central. That was very, very similar for me when I was a student. The rest of the day is gone if you do not feel that kind of personal touch. And these days, we make children scan their QR code when they get into school just to feed some accountability statistics. So actually, I think this increasing commodification of education is, one of the things that we should challenge in the times in we live. We have made students consumers, parents, clients, teachers, service providers, and in the end, it has disengaged each and every of these stakeholders from the process. It has made learning a transactional phenomenon, not a relational phenomenon that Jack Ma spoke so well about. Now, how can we bring people back, bring about structural change to education through co-creation? One word that came out in many, many contexts here. Or again, in Princess Laurentine's words, how can we seek out the views of the invisible children and not just the eloquent children? How can we actually find the sources of education, the people that we teach? But I also think we shouldn't, set a false dichotomy between that kind of individual responsiveness and the strengths of a system. And actually, John, you made that point really well. Greater responsiveness will actually require stronger, not weaker systems. If you just, create a zoo without carefully creating it, the bigger animals will eat the small ones very, very quickly. And I think sort of this kind of systemic approach to curation, having a strong system and at the one that is actually very individualizing, that will be the challenge about the future of education. My second point is about relevance, and I think that's something that also was permeating all of our discussions here. Is pretty clear from the discussion that the biggest risk to schooling today is not its inefficiency, and we can talk about it a lot. The OECD has a lot to say on this, but it's really the loss of relevance and purpose in schooling. That's the biggest threat, and when fast gets really fast, being slow to adapt makes you very, very slow. And that's, I think, the kind of issues that we have. If you would run a shopping center and not a school, and you find, every day from 100 customers, 30 walk out and they don't buy anything. And you find this today and tomorrow and week after, you start to change your inventory. And we are not doing this in school. We are just keeping on doing this. And I think we live in this world where the kind of things that are easy to teach and easy to test are disappearing. That is the fundamental challenge for educators today. They have become easy to digitize, to automate. And the only reason why we should fear computers and artificial intelligence that we have made ourselves too similar to what computers can do best, not the other way around. Jack Ma expressed it really well. And that's the product of yesterday's education, when we didn't have computers, when we needed people to do those kinds of routine tasks. Why it is so much easier to digitize, people like us, office workers, than, a Neanderthal thousands of years ago. It's because, we have made ourselves so similar to computers, and our education systems have produced those kinds of knowledge and skills. But again, some of the young leaders here, very amazing. I remember one of the people from the World Skills event. They said, yes, automation and I will probably change and come to my field and make everything different. But, I'm just going to go on, keep learning. It seems that the future of the world is often a preoccupation of retired people, whereas the young people among us really have that will and energy to keep growing with this. And I have the same to there were some people saying, well, can we automate teachers? Well, probably if we reduce teaching to, again, knowledge transmission, one day that's going to happen. And if we can automate a teacher, well, we probably should be doing this. But if we, again, use that opportunity to redefine the role of teachers as being, great mentors, as being great coaches, designers of innovative learning environments, teaching will have a much greater future than in the pre-AI world. So what will it take to create first-class humans, not, second-class robots here? It's clear that education needs to get much better at helping us see and understand our own biases, understand our own minds, make ethical judgments. And again, this topic of values comes into this conversation in very interesting ways. In the past, we treated values at the periphery of education, something in the interface between the home and the school. Today, many of you raised the centrality of this, that actually values are the core of what we teach and how we learn. And I think moving this from implicit aspiration to explicit goals and instructional practice, I think that's the fundamental challenges of our time. Moving from situational values, I'm going to do whatever the situation allows me to do, to the kind of values, sustainable values that generate the trust, the social bonds, the hope that will be so central. No? And values, no surprise, are also at the heart of the OECD Learning Compass, our 2030 project. And we didn't make that up. Actually, we learned that from countries like Finland and Singapore. And that brings me to my third takeaway. And that's really about the power of looking outward, of peer learning. It is so important that we don't just look forward, but keep looking outward. And that's not about, copying and pasting practice from other places and other countries. It's about looking very seriously and dispassionately at our own practice and in the context of practice elsewhere. What works and what culture, what context. Understanding cultures. Many of you, Jack Ma started with this, but many picked that up later on, the importance for us to really understand other ways of thinking, other cultures, and that's really what global competences, Tom, is about. And I must say, one of the greatest privileges I have is that I have been able to visit schools in over 60 countries, and I must say, in every school that I have visited, I've learned something important. That's something, if we have an open eye, the world is just an amazing laboratory. We spoke a lot about well-being, and Olli-Pekka, I didn't learn that in Finland. I learned that in Bhutan, a country that I didn't have anywhere on my radar screen. Looking into schools, you could experience this. Anywhere in the world, we find amazing experience. If we have an open eye, I think we can do that. Charlie Stripp's example on, the Shanghai teacher exchange is for me also a fascinating example. It's actually one of the implications or the consequences of PISA I'm most proud of, It's not, debates and discussions. It's actually teachers learning from teachers around the world about innovative educational practice. Not one saying, I know the right way and you have a different way, but people actually studying different ways of teaching. And that kind of experience has become, almost a global phenomenon now. And I must say, when that was new, Minister Truss in Britain, when she first announced it, I was actually on a panel with the BBC. I remember that, with someone from the establishment saying, this minister had just this crazy idea. She's inviting these people from Mars, spending lots of money on train tickets and plane tickets, and, what is it going to serve? We know what to do. We just need more money to do what we've always done. And I ask him, these people have, spent 1,000 years to figure out how to teach mathematics, and you think there's nothing you can learn from that? But that is still an attitude that is still quite prevailing. Looking outward, being open, I think we can do this a lot. I think also the concept of global competencies came up in many contexts, and it is so important. What could be more important in today's world for people to see the world through different lenses, appreciate different ways of thinking, think across the boundaries of subject matter disciplines. That's where innovation is going to come from. Understanding, deeply understanding, appreciating different cultures. Now, we would live in a different world if we would do better on this, but it seems for now we're not even ready to find out. I think that's the reality. I think, again, Jack Ma, also Li Jiang-yu this afternoon, you made that point, I think, very, very well. And I must say, I have that same experience in educational research. You can go to many, prestigious Western universities and ask people, give me 10 names of, very important education researchers in the Far East. And they come up with maybe one, maybe two. You go actually to many universities in the Far East and say, well, how many researchers in the West do you know? And they come up with 20 and 30 and 40 and 50. I think that's a very imbalanced understanding of this. I think we have to do a lot of homework on this. I also met this morning, I think, a really interesting person from Rwanda here who said, peer learning is interesting, but actually what we need is really peer collaboration. The future of our countries, and I speak about the OECD countries, may depend a lot more on education outside our borders than on education inside our borders. We should keep that in mind. My third point is about, making change happen. Obviously, and Vishal said this afternoon, we know what is working, and we know what is not working. And I think that is very, very true. But knowledge about what works is only as valuable as our capacity to act on it. And that's where actually the crux often is. And to transform schooling at scale, we need not just a radical vision of what is possible, but also very smart and practical strategies to make that happen. And what is clear is that the road of educational reform is littered with so many good ideas that were poorly implemented. Now, we need to get better in this. But again, people like Christoph Pommering this afternoon showed us it's actually not that difficult to scale things, to develop, to spread good practice, spread innovation. And I think we have many good ideas here that this is possible. And I think sort of this morning we had almost a dream team around this, and I think one of the topics takes away from me on the implementation challenge is that the laws, the regulations, the structures, the institutions on which we tend to focus in discussions like this, they are just, the tiny tip of a huge kind of iceberg under the waterline. That big part, the reason why it is so hard to move education isn't that tip of the iceberg, the structures. It's, about the invisible part. It's about the interests of people, the beliefs of people, the fears of people. And I think, Martin, you made that point really well. If we do not engage people in the design of change, the people at the front line, they're not going to help us with implementing change. And we often forget that. We basically keep those people out of the race. We announce big reforms, and then we are surprised when those reforms don't get really traction. That's why, as education leaders, people are rarely successful with reform unless they are very, very good to build a shared understanding, collective ownership for change among practitioners, build the capacity and the right policy climate, the resources, and also with accountability measures that encourage innovation, not compliance. Very important. The challenge really is to build more on the expertise of teachers and school leaders and to enlist them in the design of superior practices. And that's not accomplished just by letting 1,000 flowers bloom. That's very, very clear. It requires a very carefully crafted enabling environment. And I really like the discussion this morning on this. It requires, recognizing ingenuity of, teachers, of schools, of institutions, and at the same time tackling the kind of institutional structures that inhibit change. I think, Heikki, you made that point also this afternoon. We have too many of our structures built around the interests and habits of administrators and systems rather than those of learners. And leaders are needed who are really sincere about social change, who are very imaginative of policy making, and also capable of using the trust which they earn to actually deliver on reform. And Olli-Pekka, I like your point. Alignment will not come through command and control, but through shared dialogue. Now, how do we create that? And that needs to be built on trust. Trust in education as a field, trust in educational institutions, trust in schools, trust in teachers, in parents. In every public service, trust is always the essential part of good governance. Successful schools will always be the ones where great people want to work, where great people are trusted, where their ideas can be best realized, where they are trusted and where they can also place their own trust. And I think we know still, even after today's year, we know still too little about how trust is actually developed in education, and also how it's sustained over time, or how it can be restored if trust is broken. And the simple thing is that, trust cannot be legislated, it cannot be mandated, it's always intentional, it can only be nurtured and inspired through healthy relationship. And I really liked your point, Olli-Pekka, on this. And that's another lesson I learned from you. At the time when command and control structures are challenged, building trust is perhaps the most promising way for us to fuel tomorrow's education systems that we talked about. My fourth point is really about making education everybody's business, and that's, I think, the real strength of the Forum for World Education. It's one of the few platforms that we have that get society to speak about education, including, very, very important, the people who are using skills, the business sector. And I remember Vishal telling us, the 15-year-old child in India isn't doing literacy and numeracy, but making very important life choices, maybe the most important choices in their lives. Children are the transformation, as he said it. Now, schools are very, very good in keeping students inside and the rest of the world outside. Now, that's the traditional firewall school system set that we have built, but we can change this now. The work of Nick Chambers that we learned about, education employees is a great example. It's not about, new institutions, putting more people into the system. No, it's simply by opening school doors and bringing society into schools, by helping, just people in society, parents, explaining their work to their children and showing them how the world in the future is going to look like. It's actually, when you think about it, very, very simple to do. But it seems hard in the kind of institutional setup that we have, Remember Jack Ma, we used to learn to do the work, now learning is the work. That's, I think, where we are, and that's true for education, for teachers everywhere. Or Princess Laurentine, it's not about learning about global competency or citizenship, it's about experiencing citizenship. So I think, the push from business leaders, people like, Richard Branson, Jack Ma, David Cruikshank, we heard them all. That, I think, is so much needed. We just need a lot more of those kinds of people who actually, put their voice on. And what I really liked is in this venue here in the forum is that business leaders who spoke did not speak about, the qualifications of their workers. No, they spoke about the future of their countries. They saw the much bigger and broader picture, and I think that's extremely valuable for this. My last point is about, and this come up particularly today, the urgency of tackling the gateways in education, the exams, the assessments, the gatekeepers. That's really the white elephant in the room. We keep learners, teachers, parents, employers, prisoners of those kinds of gateways. University entrance exams. The way in which universities have bundled educational content, educational delivery, and accreditation has actually created huge monopolies that we would not tolerate in any other part of our economies. We would do something about it. When people extract huge amount of money, remember Jack Ma, college degree is big receipt that you get from tuition. Now that's the monopolies that we have created, and that actually becomes sort of huge barriers for more people to acquire better and more relevant skills. I think that's going to be something very, very important, and I don't think this is actually rocket science. We could change, this is the one part that we could change quickly today, redesign the gateways and instructional systems. Technology allows us actually to build 21st century assessment systems. We have very good examples for this even at the OECD. The biggest crime that you can make in an assessment is to look up things on your smartphone. People will immediately throw you out. Well, tomorrow's assessments should be designed by encouraging everybody, look up what you like in the smartphone. We're not going to test that. We're going to test whether you can make sense of what you see. Second biggest crime you can make is, look up things from your neighbor. They throw you out for that. Well, we talk about collaborative problem solving and, social skills. Now, why do we build our assessment and exam systems around, collaborative? We can solve those problems today. But, I see this all the time. Heikki, you made, and also Rebecca also yesterday, you made important points about changing PISA. Well, there are many people around there who say, oh, well, we want to measure change, so don't change the measures. And that's how we have kept the measures like we have for many, many years. And we're going to keep, again, people prisoner of the past for them. And we sacrifice validity gains for efficiency gains. We sacrifice relevance for reliability. And again, we are also in part to blame for this as citizens. We are going to be very critical when there is some level of ambiguity in any kind of exam results. You can lose your job as a minister for this. I can give you examples of this. Now, we never fire anyone when an exam is irrelevant and outdated and restrictive. I think this is something society has something to do with. And I must say, my experience with global competences in PISA, where I do believe we have a very strong assessment now, but a very limited take-up, is an example of this. Now, people are very hesitant. Oh, well, what is it going to show about my students? Then, the next round I said, okay, global competency, very complicated. Let's start with something simpler. Let's think about creative thinking. That can't be that controversial. But we got into the very same dynamic. We have now people saying, oh, actually, we don't teach creative thinking as much as we would like. So, if you assess us, we might not look. So we have the same kind of debate. So we come back to reading, mathematics and science. I can give you a third example. We have designed, what I'm really, really proud about, we have designed a new assessment of social emotional skills of young people, 10 and 15-year-olds. I think it's really, really groundbreaking. You know, we have 80 countries doing reading, math, and science in PISA. We have 11 regions picking up this assessment of social emotional skills. And you can help us. You know, I really think this is where society, communities, and business leaders can push for change. You know, going to governments, we need a different metric. We need to change the criteria for success. There's no excuse anymore. This can be done, and it can be done well. This is where technology is really good. Well, I don't want to talk any longer. I just want to thank a few participants. First, again, the young leaders here, really inspiring. Our two brilliant moderators, Tian Wei and Tom. And then, of course, you know, Cheng Davis, the mastermind and inspirator of all of our discussions here. And she's great plans and ideas already for the future. I'm sure you're going to hear about them next. But I also want to thank a few other people who I've been really amazed by. You know, Grace Na Tianqianjin, you have heard about her, Vicky Zhang, Chang Yan Liu, Felix Zhao, and Elan Wu. And Hikya, I realize I'm using the English nicknames. Actually, I think we need to do better. I need to do better on this. But I also want to thank my team at the OECD, Michael Stevenson, who created the sessions. You know, in August, I gave him a call and said, you know, can you help us? It's a really important event to curate this. And he said, oh, yeah, great. You know, next year is going to be a lot easier for me. I'm very happy to do this. And I said, no, it's actually this year. And it's actually in 4 months. And you can see what the quality of our discussions and the frame for this has been. I'm really very grateful, Michael, for the work you've done. Cassandra Davis, Parker Hart, Daniel Chulio, Anya Krause, and Marina Mon. I could mention many more. And also the many volunteers from our staff who've spent the last 2 days to actually make all of this work. But now, let me hand over to someone who has been silent so far, but who actually created the platform for our work over the last 2 days, and who is another one of those who know how to create real momentum for change. Mr. Wang, the floor is yours. Thank you.
尊敬的 OECD 主席先生、施莱克尔先生、主持人先生、女士们、先生们，大家下午好。今天世界教育论坛即将落下大幕，来自几十个国家和国际组织的政界、商界、教育界等各领域专家学者精英，以及19个国家的青年领袖，共同一起汇聚巴黎，在新视角共同探究教育创新改革的机遇和挑战，聚会人的智慧，推动引领教育的未来新方案。我觉得大家都从不同的角度视觉贡献了伟大的智慧。我们知道人类的发展历史已经证明，教育是科学技术发展、人类文明进步的核心助推力、影响力、软实力。互联网发展的日新月异，人工智能、AI、5G、物联网等新技术带领我们进入一个全面信息化的生活、 终身学习的伟大新时代，审视人类面临的全球变暖、生态环境、区域动乱、局部战争、贫困疾苦、性别平等、妇女、儿童权益、家庭暴力等一系列影响教育、区域公平的问题，需要我们今天在座的大家共同发挥伟大智慧。我们需要认真总结过去多年来的教育，并且以我们自身实际教育工作者的伟大行动，肩负起时代交给我们的使命和责任。我觉得这2天大家都做到了。我们所倡导的参与世界教育论坛，就是这份国际责任担当的充分体现。过去2天的会议，通过国际教育专家、智库学者的充分交流，探讨的成果丰硕，彰显出世界各国对教育的理解，体现了全球双边、多边、开放贸易体系下教育公共外交的战略新思维、新作用。由于所处经济发展阶段，政治制度、意识形态、语言文化存在的差异，我们各国更应该需要通过加强教育文化交流，增进互信，缩小分歧，为增进世界和平与繁荣，构建人类命运共同体以及优先发展教育而共同努力。我们各位专家都知道 ，OECD 在世界范围内享有盛誉，被称为全球披萨测评研究和智库结合融汇发展的高端俱乐部，对世界各国经济合作发展政策制定都有着深远的影响力。前不久，在中国教育部举办的世界教育课程改革峰会上，我和 OECD 教育与技能司理事长安达烈·施莱克尔先生在多方对话中，他做了重要发言。中国改革开放40年，经济的快速发展，目前正在加快推进教育国际化的开放创新。本人认为，中国广大的教育市场与 OECD 可以在披萨测评标准上设立合作示范校，扩大教育深度的创新合作，以数学测评、阅读测评带动各学科测评发展。这就是未来的教育的创新改革。依托北京学校作为调研试点校，从披萨测评入手，促进世界教育的未来创新发展测评的标准。今天我们处在一个伟大的变革新时代，国际不确定的因素在增强，全球挑战日益加剧，但是教育无国界。我们在 OECD 巴黎总部聚焦基础教育， 职业教育、高等教育等面临的问题和挑战，以适应当前以及未来移动教育改变终身教育，改变世界教育的格局，改变世界教育、区域教育资源发展的不均衡。随着教育事业不断的转型升级，培养人才的标准在不断的变化，随着经济结构的调整和人才产业结构的调整，我觉得我们的教育应当不断地在转型调整，适应国际社会的发展、国际产业的发展。本人作为北京王府学校的校长，我一直坚持改革创新办校，坚持以德施教、育人为先、中西合璧、立志未来的教育理念，以培养具有国际视野和全球竞争力的复合型精英领袖人才为目标和责任，秉承国际化的教育理念，坚持东西方文化课程的融合。王府学校从03年、06年率先引进了 Level AP 课程，获得 IB 国际课程的认证。学校设立了首家剑桥国际教育考试中心，成为牛津 AQA 国际考试的示范校。ETS 中国区的示范校，中国国家考试课程的示范校。学校还取得了 WAS 认证，并设立了 AP、A-Level、ACT、ETS 加1、PSAT、SK、AMC 等所有的国际考试的考点。我觉得刚才安卓先生提出了一句话：教育的市场，也就是教育的豪华超市。教育的豪华超市针对学生多样多元需求，改变自身命运，实现未来为国际服务的一个重要的职能。王府学校连续7年参加联合国教科文组织的移动学习示范教学的案例，获得18个国家教育部有关部门，包括部长在内的到王府学校去调研。我觉得这一切都是为未来教育发展、改革发展提供了一个基础。20多年来，培养了9000多名优秀毕业生，他们进入到包括哈佛、牛津、剑桥、耶鲁、斯坦福、哥伦比亚、帝国理工、加州理工、伦敦大学、多伦多、麦吉尔、大不列颠哥伦比亚大学等在内的世界名校都有王府学校的学生。这一个事件证明，披萨标准的国际认证符合未来全球各个国家参照以数学专业为载体的阅读以及各学科评判测评标准的一个使命，正在面向我们走来。文明的繁盛离不开求同存异，开放包容；人类的进步离不开互相交流。至此，2019年末，2020年 即将来临之际，王府学校公益基金会将携手智库研究机构，在世界教育的论坛上推出国际理解教育在中国未来青少年外交官的培养在王府现状与未来的研究报告，契合今天大会的主题，符合对全球公民教育和 OECD 对全球素养测评标准的发展。我们希望能够借此抛砖引玉，和大家共同探究未来教育的创新和改革的方向。我需要说明的一点，我们在筹委会5次的筹备过程中，我们严正教授以及10多个国家的执委会的成员各自不辞辛苦，积极参与，建言献策。我觉得他们都是伟大的新时代教育的专家、改革开放者、引领者。我觉得我们最后作为论坛的联合创始人，再次呼吁今天在座的各位专家，以及他们为了怕明天的罢工影响了自己的航班，甚至因为自己繁忙的工作提前离开了这个会议场，而没有听到我的声音，表示遗憾呀！大家掌声。我们共同期待以本次论坛为契机，和 OECD 共同打造未来全球教育的导师。大家掌声。期待世界教育论坛为全世界的经济发展、科技进步、社会公平和人类幸福继续发挥未来越来越大的作用。让我们一起缔造未来教育伟大的新时代。谢谢大家。
So thank you very much, Mr. Wang, for leaving us with those stirring words that will send us out, determined that humans in the future will learn the right things in the right ways. It's a real call to action for all of us. Thank you to the brilliant OECD team, Andreas, Michael, the folk on the technical side. Please do put Andreas's, in fact, both those videos on YouTube as quickly as possible. Thank you to the translators as well up there. And most of all, thank you to our panelists, but also everyone who gave up 2 days of their time because you are so passionate about this effort. If we get this wrong, as we've heard, distrust, polarization, and extremism will increase. But if we get this right, then humans in the future will be kind enough to reduce the inequality we've heard of. They will be curious enough to make the next leaps of ingenuity to take humanity forward, and they will be brave enough to take on that polarization and extremism in our global society today. So thank you for participating with such creativity and patience and resilience, and see you at Davos next year. There's something else about to happen.
Sorry, my name is Alistair Jones, and Cheng asked me to read out a declaration for the Forum World Education. Thank you, Tom, for your wonderful cheering and letting me speak, actually. But Heike, it's nice to have a minister we actually collaborated with. I haven't collaborated with the current one, so but this Just want to read this on behalf of the steering committee of the World Forum for Education. My name is Alistair Jones and I'm from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. The Paris Delegation, the Paris Declaration takes its name from the meeting that we've just held of business leaders, policymakers, NGOs, students, researchers, educationalists at the Paris Forum for World Education held here at the OECD Paris. More than 40 international leaders in education, business from over 20 countries and all continents presented their vision for the future of education to an audience of over 400 people from ages 15 to 80, including more than 30 young leaders from 17 countries. This was followed by active discussion of where we might go to from here, from early years, compulsory schooling, through to tertiary, to learning for life. This declaration seeks to establish a roadmap to improve the quality of future education for all, for positive economic and social outcomes across diverse contexts globally for all. In developing this vision, it is about educating for the future of society and work, collaborating for global benefit, building collaborative approaches with business communities ensure that quality education for sustainable and productive social outcomes is achieved. We achieve this through 5 actions and 5 value propositions, and these have been gleaned from this forum in real time. We need to rethink knowledge and our skill requirements, the interconnected aspects of knowledge systems and the interconnected elements of discipline, specific interdisciplinarity and epistemic knowledge. Experiential learning within and outside the classroom, locally and globally, and the inclusion of entrepreneurship, innovation, balancing learning by studying with learning by doing, and strategies for tackling significant local, national and global problems with attention to diversity, inclusion in a global world. Secondly, embedding global competencies in the curriculum. Building on the OECD Global Competency Framework 2030, how we build literacy and numeracy skills as well as digital and data literacy in a global world, thinking about ethics, social outcomes, emotional, physical and wellness over the whole lifetime. Developing multiple learning pathways and, just as we heard, multiple gateways. Effective transitions and connections to support students across the age spans from early years to tertiary. Broad exposure to vocational and tertiary options, diverse pathways for learning and career development. Establishing transformational approaches to education through co-creating teaching and learning, personalising learning and building competence and confidence, and supporting real-world explorations and community-wide collaborations. And also building change management into educational reforms. Often we leave that. We implement the reform, but we don't think about the change management process. It's also about building research and evidence-based quality outcomes through evidence-informed and development evaluation and responsiveness of the system, enhancing, as we've heard, teacher education, but school leadership development and support, and reconceptualising the curriculum, and developing effective infrastructure, both virtual and physical, as we saw earlier. Embedded in all these actions are essential values and dispositions essential for successful student and social outcomes. And the values and dispositions are related to responsiveness and adaptive practice, relational and cultural interaction, integrity and respectfulness, diversity, inclusion, and most of all, resilience. From these actions, values and dispositions, the steering group for the World Forum for Education will develop a roadmap for a way forward. Thank you very much.